Welcome back. It's Tony Robbins again here with Money Master the Game, 7 simple steps to financial freedom. Let's get into gear now. We've given you the background, the overview of what this book is really about. Let's go through the 7 steps by beginning with step number 1, tap the power. In this session, we're going to make the most important financial decision of your life. And it's not a decision you might think it is. In fact, most people think that the way you get free, financially free or wealthy, is you get this big score. Somehow I'm going to make a bunch of money, or somehow I'm going to make this investment in Apple and it's going to triple, and that's what's going to make me wealthy. But all the research shows, in reality, people who earn huge sums of money rarely keep those huge sums of money. And very few people really get to the number that they're really after when they're trying to make that big score. And so I really want to show you a much simpler way. There are literally millions of people around the world that have become millionaires, and they've done it really slowly and easily because they've just tapped into a very simple power. And that power I know you've heard of called compound interest or compounded growth. The idea of growth upon growth, multiplying itself. Let me explain what I mean. Early in the book, I decided one of the people I wanted to go visit with was a man named Burton Malkiel. Burton Malkiel, or Bert, is an amazing professor who's at Princeton, and I wanted to go see him because he wrote a book that's become kind of an investing classic called A Random Walk Down Wall Street. And he wrote it in the 70s, and it's still popular today. And in it, he kind of shook up the investment field because he came up with this idea saying, you know what? People should be able to have a tiny bit of money and own all of the stock market and not pay these huge mutual fund fees that are usually hidden, that are eating away at your ability to grow and compound what you have into real wealth. And he was one of the earliest people to ever come up with this idea of promoting the idea of an index fund. An index fund, again, is really simple. Instead of buying Apple or PepsiCo or Coke or whoever the case may be, you can actually buy this index which mimics the entire stock market. So you get a micro piece of all these companies, all the best companies, for example, in the S&P 500 or the Standard & Poor's 500, if you're familiar with that. And so his idea has turned into a $7 trillion a year business. And another person I got to spend quite a bit of time with that you'll learn about here in the book and here with me is a gentleman who started Vanguard, and that's Jack Bogle. He took this idea and he bet his fortune on it. Both of these men understood something. And when I sat down with Burton Malkiel, the first thing I said was, look, I know you're a straight shooter. The guy definitely shoots from the hip. He doesn't care what people think. I said, tell me, what's the single biggest mistake that individuals make, that investors make in their life? And he said, Tony, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is they don't take full advantage of the power of compounding. He said, Einstein said it was one of the single greatest inventions of humanity. Understanding it can change everything in your life, and everybody says they understand it, he told me, but very few people tap it. He said, understanding something intellectually is not the same as doing it. If you're doing it, then you know it. If you understand intellectually, you know, like I've said before, that and $3 will almost buy a Starbucks mug of coffee. So what you really have to understand is how it works. And so I asked him, I said, Bert, what's the best way to teach it? And he went into this riff. And you know, he's in his late 70s, and it was kind of like I've read him describe this before, but watching him do it there in front of my eyes, his eyes sparkled and he got all in state. You can see he's done this so many times, but it's like a great musician, you know, it's like a Bruce Springsteen going off and doing a riff there directly for you. And his riff was to tell me the story about William and James. He said, tell me, to give you a real example. Let's take 2 guys, William and James, and let's say William starts out at 20 years old, and he starts taking a little bit of his money and just locking it down and setting aside and investing it. Let's say he takes $300 a month, $4,000 a year, and he puts that aside and he doesn't touch it, and he puts it in the stock market, and let's say over time he averages 10%, and let's say he does it in an index fund, so he's not being taxed continuously, so it grows tax-free until the time he's going to take it out. And let's say he makes that investment, stay with me now, William makes that investment from the time he's 20, puts away that $300 a month, that $4,000 a year, till the time he's 40. He never makes another investment again. That's it. And then we see what he has at age 65. And then on the other hand, he has a brother named James. And James, he doesn't get started when he's 20. He doesn't get started when he's 30. He waits till he's 40, and then he starts to say, God, I better start doing something. So he does the exact same thing his brother did. He starts putting away $300 a month, $4,000 a year roughly. He gets the same exact return, let's say of 10% in a tax-protected environment. And at 65, from 40 to 65 is 25 years. So he spends 25 years putting money in the system. Think of it, $4,000 times 25 years is $100,000. His brother, William, he only did this for 20 years, 20 to 40, 20 years, times 4,000, 80,000. So the second brother, William and James put in significantly more money into the system, done it longer, but at age 65, they both got the same rate of return. Who do you think is doing better off? I know you know the answer, but the real question is, how much better off? And that's what most people have no clue of. William, who started earlier and quit earlier, has 600% more money. Not 20%, not 50%, not 600% more money. At age 65, both these men who got the same rates of return, but one started earlier and quit earlier, he has $2.5 million for William. And James, who started later and put more money into the system, but he started later, so he got less compounding, he ended up with $400,000. A $2.1 million difference. Now that could be the difference between total financial freedom for somebody or doing okay for a while and at 70 having to get a job to be somebody greeting people at Walmart. See, this understanding of compounding is how you can free yourself from this idea that somehow you've got to make this giant score. Because the more you try to create that giant score, even if you get it, usually isn't kept. And how can I say that? Because I've been in this business working with people, some of the greatest entertainers, actors, musicians, sports stars, government officials who go off and make money afterwards. And I can tell you one thing, rarely do they keep it because they've never understood how to really tap into this power. And I'll give you one more example because Bert gave it to me at the time. He said Ben Franklin, when he was living alive, there were two cities that were kind of like sister cities for him. And it was Philadelphia and Boston. He went back and forth between them. They felt like hometowns to him. So when he died in 1790, he gave both cities $1,000, but the control and the guide was they couldn't be touched. The money had to be invested and had to be left alone for 100 years. After 100 years, he already calculated what he knew it would be worth. He said they could both take out $500,000. That 1,000 would be worth 500,000, he had calculated, or more. It was actually worth a lot more. And then at 200 years, they have to leave the rest in and let it accumulate. And at 200 years, they could take all the money out for both cities. Well, both cities got a $500,000 hit from a $1,000 investment 100 years out. That's pretty amazing mathematics. When it grows, you think about that. Nothing was added to it. It was just natural interest growing, the growth that happened in the market. And then what happened in 200 years? That $1,000 had grown to $6.5 million, even though they'd already taken $500,000 out and it didn't get to compound for 100 years. $6.5 million, that's a 3,000% return. So compounding is amazing. And I know you've heard of it. I'm sure you've got examples you've heard. But what I really want to do in this particular session with you is get you to take step one to financial freedom. And that is to start tapping this power. And the way you're going to tap this power is give up the illusion that you're going to get this home run. And I'll help you with a home run. We'll use a metaphor. How about Curt Schilling? Boston Red Sox. If you're a sports fan, you know about this man because he went to 2 World Series. Brilliant man. He made $100 million in income. $100 million. Now check this out. How much does he have today? He's bankrupt. In fact, he's not only bankrupt, he's upside down $50 million. How's that possible? Because when people make huge sums of money, no matter how much money we make, have you ever noticed that we seem to find a way to spend it? And you say, that's impossible. But when you make that much money, you buy yourself a business or you buy an island, and guess what? You can be upside down so quick it makes your head spin. About, if you're old enough, maybe you remember LA Confidential and the woman who won the Academy Award for that, Kim Basinger. Or maybe if you've really been around a while, you remember 9.5 Weeks. She was the highest paid actress of her day. She was getting $10 million a movie at a time when no one ever dreamed of those kinds of numbers. But guess what? Today, she went through bankruptcy. She bought a little town, paid $20 million in Texas for a town, made some bad mistakes, and went bankrupt. I could give you a list that'll make your head spin. I mean, some of the greatest people that found themselves, if not bankrupt, completely busted. People like Willie Nelson, Marvin Gaye, Francis Ford Coppola, who did Godfather, for God's sakes. These are people that made more money than most people ever dream of. Or how about Mike Tyson? Mike Tyson made $500 million in prize money. He actually earned $500 million and then went bankrupt. In fact, he was upside down $27 million. Michael Jackson reportedly had a contract for almost $1 billion, and he couldn't make the payments on his ranch, the Neverlands Ranch, of $25 million. And after he's passed away, people have made a fortune, like a lot of artists. But at the time of his death, things are pretty rough. So it doesn't matter how much money you have. In fact, most people describe what happens with, let's say, a fighter, even somebody as brilliant as Money Mayweather, brilliant guy, unbelievable fighter. But you know, if you talk to nobody less than 50 Cent, his former friend and partner, he said, let me tell you what he does. He goes out and he fights, he gets the money, he spends the money, and then he fights. He said, and you know, he carries around a Louis Vuitton bag full of literally $1 million in cash, just in case anything special happens he wants to take advantage of. So, God forbid if something happens to this man and his ability to fight, he could be in real trouble. We can't do that. And it's easy to make fun of somebody else and go, well, look at what they're doing. But don't most Americans really, like, instead of fight, say work, earn the money, spend the money, work? That cycle is the worst cycle on earth, and that's a cycle I want to get you out of right now, today, by tapping the power and making step one the most important investment decision in your life. So what the heck is it? Well, what if you decided that you were no longer going to be a financial trader? What are you talking about, Tony? I'm not a financial trader. I don't invest in stocks. I don't do that stuff all day long. Most Americans are financial traders, even though they don't think of themselves that way. Why? Because if you're trading time for money, you're making the worst financial trade in the world. Your goal, and the goal I have for you with this book, is to make money your slave. You want money to work for you, so you don't have to. Until that happens, you'll always have some level of uncertainty or fear or stress or insecurity, because there's only so many things that can happen that mess up your income flow and you're in trouble. What would it feel like if you could build what I would call a money machine? Something that made money while you slept. Something that literally every day of your life, even if you weren't working, could provide you an income without ever having to work again. Because see, I ask people all the time, what are you investing for? And people say, well, I don't know, I'm doing my 401k so someday I can retire, or I'm investing so that I can get, you know, more assets or a bigger nest egg. No, you're not. You're investing for one thing and one thing only. You're investing because you want an income. You want an income that will last longer than you live. In fact, I mentioned before, the number one fear of baby boomers today is that not they're going to die. That's their number two fear. The number one fear is I want to run out of money while I'm alive. And millennials have the same fear because, according to statistics, about 70 to 75% of the people are going to run out of money before they die, and we're all living longer. So the chance of that happening is off the charts unless you and I create a money machine. What does that mean? It's really simple. The most important financial decision of your life is deciding that a portion of all the money you earn in your life is yours to keep. That you're not going to give it up. It's for you and for your family, and you're going to keep a portion of what you earn forever, and you're going to grow it. That you're not going to give it to, you know, Kate Spade. You're not going to give it to the Gap. You're not going to give it to whoever you normally gave it to. You're going to keep that for yourself, and you're going to grow it into something that literally will make it so you don't have to work as long as you live. I call it a money machine because it's really simple. If you were to just think of yourself right now as you're a money machine, if you take a look at this graphic, here you are, you work your tail off, and what happens? You use your efforts to get money. You trade time for money, you take work and effort for money. But what if you just did something so simple? You already know to do it, you're just not probably doing it at the level that you could. What if you made a decision that a percentage of what you earn, you're never going to see it, it's just going to instantly and automatically be put into building this money machine, where you're going to take a portion of what you earn, 10%, 15%, 8%, 20%. You get to decide the number. But a portion of what you earn, no matter what, before you ever see it, it's almost like a tax, but the tax is paid to you instead of the government. The tax is for your future self. The tax is about creating financial freedom, so you're not like most people who end up their life being stressed out all the time, where you're the person that can do what you want, when you want, where you want, with whomever you want, because you got freedom. How do you get there? You take a portion of this money that you've done right now and you've earned, you automatically start to fill up this money machine. And just visually imagine, as you work, more goes in, you fill it up, and there's a point, a tipping point, if you will. We call the tipping point a critical mass. There's a point where the money you've saved and invested will have grown to a point that there's enough there that if you were to get just a small return on your money in a secure environment, the income off your investments, just the income, the investments are still there, the money is still there, that critical mass, that nest egg is so big that the interest you make on it alone, that interest gives you the income you need to live your life as long as you live without ever having to work again as long as you live, period. Now, I have that privilege. And I'm fortunate to have helped a lot of people establish that who thought it would never happen, because they don't understand that when you take that little piece aside, you're not just putting in this money machine. If you're smart, if you do what we show you in this book, the other 6 steps, that money won't just sit there accumulating. That money is going to grow. That money while you sleep is going to make more money and grow and grow and grow, so you get to that critical mass, that nest egg, that peak number where the income frees you for the rest of your life. Now here's what's ironic. And I mentioned this before, but I want to reinforce it for you. If you do this, you will get to the point where you won't have to work. And then I will warn you in advance, you will work. And the reason why is because the secret to financial freedom is not having to work. It's not working. The idea that you don't have to work frees you up. Us, as human beings, we have to do something to be productive or we go crazy. I can't tell you the number of people that I've met who've hit the jackpot and then they don't do anything and they're depressed or they're frustrated or they're bored out of their mind. You just want to make sure that what you do with your time is what you love, that it's your passion. And if your passion is your work, you'll work more. In fact, it used to be that the game, remember, was get rich and retire at 40. And now the game is get rich and retire at 80 or 75 or 85. Like I've told you, my friend Steve Wynn, 72 years old, still going there. Warren Buffett, 84 years old. I mean, you can go to person after person after person. The people who make the most money, people who make more than $750,000 a year, the vast majority say they'll never retire, or if they retire, it'll be in their late 70s. That's because the game is different. But I'm going to tell you something. When you don't have to work, you don't have to, you walk different. You talk different. You feel different. You go, Tony, well, that sounds like a pipe dream to me. That's because you don't understand compounding. Because you're looking for that big score that hopefully someday you're going to get, when really, truly, if you were William and not James, and you took a little bit of money and set it aside, and you just let that grow through time, you can have millions of dollars for yourself. And I'm going to show you how to make sure to maximize it. I'm going to show you how to make it more tax efficient so you keep more of that money. I'm going to show you how to diversify it so you protect it. I'm going to show you what I've learned from the best people on earth, but none of it is any good if you don't decide on a specific number that you're going to automate to make this happen. Now, I know when I say this, a lot of people say, well, how much? Well, the minimum should be 10%. And ideally, in the world we live in today, if you're 40 or above, 45, you should be looking closer to 15% because you have less time to use compounding. So you got to load the system with a bit more. And first thing you'd say, I'm sure many people is, are you kidding me? I don't have that kind of money. I'm spending everything I have right now to keep my credit card bills going, to keep myself going. Everything I earn, I spend. That'll always be true. It doesn't matter how much money people make. Trust me, I've been there myself. You know, I went from barely surviving, trying to figure out what to do, to earning extremely well, and then barely surviving because I overspent. And I mean, it's just the nature of human beings. Our vision gets bigger, we have more resources. But if you will draw a line in the sand and you don't have to think about it. The thing that Burt Malkiel told me, he said, Tony, the secret to it all is you got to pick that number, and then you don't change it. It's like a tax, and you don't see the money. We'll show you how in the book here. You automate it so that money is taken out immediately. If you run your own business or you go to work somewhere and they raise our taxes by 5%, 8%, 10%, you're going to hate it. You're going to be mad as hell, and it's still going to get paid. That's just the way we are as human beings. So why not create a freedom tax? And it's really not a tax at all. What about a freedom gift? I call it the Freedom Fund. What you want to do is decide right now, what percentage, and by the way, I'm going to mention one thing. You might say, well, Tony, I'm already doing this. I'm already contributing my 401k. Then I want you to decide right now, and I'm going to show you how to maximize your 401k. I'm going to show you how to get rid of the fees in your 401k. They're eating up your compounding. You're compounding fees if you don't know what you're doing in this area. But if you're already doing this, I want you to pick a number right now that you might increase to. And before you pick the number, whether it's 10 or 15 or 20, whatever that number is, you're going to want to decide it and not change it, other than increase it maybe in the future. And you're going to make it automated so that money goes into your Freedom Fund. Not a savings account, a place where you're going to be investing that money and growing it till it hits a critical mass that throws off the income you need so you never have to work again. So you have that true financial freedom. So if you're saying, well, Tony, I don't know how I'm going to do this, let me give you 2 pieces to help you think about this. I could name dozens of stories or examples of people that I've met over the years who started with nothing and became wealthy because they just took a little piece off and forgot about it and let it grow and grow and grow and grow. But I'll give you one of my favorite examples, Theodore Johnson. This is a man who never made more than $14,000 a year in his entire lifetime. He worked for UPS, and he only did one thing different than most people. At late stage of life, in his late 80s, he's worth $70 million. He did not inherit any money. All the money came from compounding $14,000 a year. How did he do that? He committed to one thing. He decided 20% of all he earned was going to be set aside. Every check, every bonus, every situation, 20%. There was no excuses. He'd have to find a way to do things differently, earn money other places, but that 20% was sacred. And it compounded over a lifetime for him and gave him $70 million. In his late 80s, he donated $35 million away, still had $35 million, and guess what? Never made more than 14 grand. I mean, there's no excuse. When you understand the power of compounding, it's game over. But you gotta get beyond your knowing what it is to acting, and that's really what I'd like you to do right now. So right now, why not make a decision right now in this moment and say, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna stop trading time for money. I'm gonna make money work for me. I'm gonna make money my slave, and I'm gonna make a decision right now that no matter how hard it may seem in this moment, I'll get used to it. I've got to decide a number that I'm going to set aside, and that number's not going to move, and I'm going to automate it. What is that number for you? Is it 10%? Is it 15? Is it 18, 20? Is it, gosh, I got to at least start with 7? What's the number going to be? Make a decision right now. And if you already have a portion that you're putting aside, it's only going to get you so far. Make a number larger now. That'll be the decision, the most important financial decision in your life, because investing can only be done with the capital you set aside. And if you wait to have a bunch of money to invest, you'll lose all the years that little bit of money could have been compounding and going crazy. Compounding is the ultimate power. Tap that power right now by making your decision. Have you made it? Write it down. You know, when you think of something ahead, it goes out. Write it down. Drop it right now into your planner. Send yourself an email with that in the headline. What are you going to do right now so you lock it in your head? And so you lock it in your life. And then the question is, how do you go about automating that? Just open the book, chapter 1.3. It'll walk you through how to do it. You can go to Schwab. You can go to TD Ameritrade. There are a variety of people that can automate it, so it takes right out of your check into holding place. You say, well, then where will I take that money? Where will I invest that money? Those are the steps to come. First step is get in the game, and the only way you're going to be able to get in that game is start to tap the power by automating. Now, if you're sitting here right now saying, Tony, all this is well, and I've heard this before, I know compounding, then, you know, but I just don't have any money to invest. What am I going to do? Then I'd like you to tap into the power of behavioral economics. One of the things I did when I wrote this book is I said, okay, people are going to know. Some things we're going to talk about, like what we're talking about right now, is frankly common sense. But common sense is not too common. Have you noticed that? People know it, but they aren't doing it. So I said, I want to get people to do it. So I went and met with a whole series of Nobel Prize winners of behavioral economics. And the behavioral economists are guys that spend their entire life, and women, focusing on what is it in human nature that makes us screw up financially? And what technique can we use to get beyond our minds so that we don't need discipline and we automatically get the right results? What these behavioral economics experts do is they basically study the human brain and human nature, and they try to figure out what is it in our nature, the way the human brain works, that makes us make the wrong decisions when it comes to finances. And one of those things has to do with the fact that, you know, we want these things, we give more value to things that are immediate than in the future. Like what is in front of you right now seems more real than 10 years from now, even though 10 years from now you're going to get there, and if you don't do something now, it's going to be painful. And so a lot of these experts have figured a way to get around your own nature with these little behavioral tricks. So it doesn't take discipline to make it happen. So for example, Shlomo Bernartzi, who's from UCLA, and Richard Thaler from Chicago, both came up with a brilliant system called Save More for Tomorrow. Let me explain how it works. So if you right now say, Tony, I know I've got to save. I know I've got to get, I've got to start tapping the power of compounding, but I'm spending every dime I have and there's no way out. First, bullshit. I'm sorry, but I just got to say bullshit. You can find a way. If it's your entire life and future depends upon it, don't accept that. We all get what we tolerate. There's a way to find it. There's something to cut. There's something to create. There's some way to add more value. We'll get to that later. But with this system, what they said is, look, if I said to you, next week we're going to meet and we're going to have this meeting would you like to have some fresh fruit or would you like to have chocolate cake? When they do this research with students, about 80% of the people say, no, I'll have some fresh fruit, especially in an environment that is somewhat health-oriented and so forth. But when they get to the meeting a week later, exactly the opposite, 80% reach for the chocolate, the chocolate cake. So it's always easy to diet in the future. And similarly, when I say you got to take some money today and invest in it, your brain says, oh, I don't have any room for that, there's no time for that. So what Shlomo and his partner Thaler did is they said, what if we let people save more tomorrow? What if you said to people today, make a commitment today that when you receive your next raise of any sort, that raise will then be put aside for savings in your freedom fund, into building your financial future. And interestingly enough, most people are saying, I'm willing to do that. I can't do it right now, but I'll do it in the future. And as a result, if you do this program, and I explain it in the book in more detail, but just the highlight note is you can go to your HR department and you can let them know. For every raise you get, you're going to take out X percentage. I'll give you an example. They took a group of people in the Midwest who were blue-collar workers with no room to be able to save. These are people that said there's no way. So both Shlomo and Thaler together said, you got to save 3.5%. Anybody can save 3.5 cents out of $1. You've got to do that. So they all agreed. They said, but then you're also going to use to this formula of save more for tomorrow, which means every time you get another raise, another 3% or 3.5% is going to be set aside. The most crazy thing happened. This group of people went from saving nothing, or 3.5%, to saving 14% on average. Now, when you start saving 14%, it's a different universe. You're going to start compounding. Get this, 65% of these blue-collar workers who never saved anything in their life were saving 19%. Now, when you start saving almost 20%, that's what made this man with $14,000 a year end up with $70 million. That's the power of compounding activated. So here's what I'm going to say to you. There is a way. And if you say, Tony, well, but there isn't. Okay, I'll agree to do this in the future, but what if I don't get a raise? Well, if you don't get a raise, I'd say to you, learn to become more effective. I always tell people, find a job where your raise becomes effective when you do. Either own your own business, get yourself in sales, do something where you have some control, or start a little business on the side. We can talk about those things later, but for right now, let's pretend you can't get any more money anywhere. How could you still do it? You can save and get that money to invest. Save something you're spending money on. How about this? Take one night a week and don't go out to dinner. Order a pizza in, watch a movie at home instead of going out to the movies. You'll save at least $40. In the world we live in today, probably a bit more than that. If you save $40 a week by just having a pizza, not going out for dinner on one of those nights, or not going out and spending that money, $40 a week sounds like so small amount. But if you took that money and you put it in your freedom fund, and you grew it at 8%, and we're going to show you some people, for example, in this book, who've averaged over 75 years closer to 10%, and with very little risk up and down. But let's say you averaged 8%, and you left it in there for 40 years. You know, you're 20 years old, you're 25 years old, you're 30 years old even. Plenty of time. Do you know what that money turns into? $40 a week? That's almost $2,000 a month. At 8% compounded, turns into $500,000 by itself. See, the money's going to get spent. The only question is, are you going to compound it in something real, or are you just going to throw it away? The real goal in step one here, tap the power. If you want to say, what's the first step of these 7 steps that are going to get you financially free? You tap the power by stop being a consumer and start to become an owner. That's what you are when you decide to invest. You become an owner in American business or world business. And when you own businesses that are growing, you get to grow with them. And as they compound in their value, you get to compound what you have in your ownership of them as well. So you got to become an owner, and you've got to become an investor. And the only way you can do that is decide on percentage you're going to set aside. Now, you can use save more for tomorrow, start with a small amount and build up. That's such an easy way to do it. You could just say, boom, I'm going to start with 15 right now. But you got to make sure that it's automated. And if you're still saying, okay, all this is wonderful, but where do I come up with this money? Well, let's take something. You've all heard people talk about their Starbucks strategy, stop drinking Starbucks. I think a lot of you are going to still drink your Starbucks. It's pretty addicted. But I'll give you a simple one. How about bottled water? You know, I come from Fiji. I have a home in Fiji, and Fiji water is very popular around the world. I don't know what bottled water you drink, but almost everywhere you go, nobody drinks out of a tap, and I think for damn good reason. But there's an alternative to the tap. It's called filters. Filters cost almost nothing, and they don't waste all the plastic. Do you know the average person, if they took 2 drinks of bottled water a day, it's the same as your pizza, right? 2 drinks a day, just think of it, over 30 days, check it out, 60, right, times $2 each, and you start going, I got myself $120 a month. You know, if it's 3 bottles of water a day, that's $180 a month. $180 a month is going to get you past that, get you in that $2,000 range again. How about you just drink filtered water, get it filtered at home? How about you get yourself, we have in our home here, these plastic bottles that you keep reusing, that they don't leach plastic also, so you're not polluting your body. And by the way, did you know a plastic bottle, sorry to get all eco on you right now, but did you know one plastic bottle takes on average 450 years to break down? I'm living here on the ocean, and almost every day there's some plastic that'll get rolling in here, and some of it's been out there for 50 years and it's still coming back ashore. It's insane. We're living in a way that makes sense. We're using all this fuel to bring the water from someone else when you could filter it right here. How about you save yourself that money and put another $500,000 in your pocket through time? Just another way of thinking about it. In fact, if you're trying to figure out how the heck do I ever get the money to invest in the first place, I'd say there's a couple places you could look, and I'll wrap this video up. One, you could certainly find some things that you're currently spending money on that no longer give you joy. A friend of mine I wrote about in the books, the lady here she finally figured out she was spending so much money on her car. It was an old car, and the fixing in the car and the fuel in the car. With financing, she'd go buy a brand new car. She went and bought a brand new Cherokee white pearlescence Jeep. She had this giant smile on her face. She'd only been through like 5 chapters of the book, but she figured out, you know what? For the money I'm spending, I could have a much better quality of life. And she was saving money also that she now put in her freedom fund to invest. In other words, money she was spending on the car, she got a better car, and the savings were now creating for a financial future where she wasn't the money machine anymore. Her freedom fund was going to become the money machine. You follow me? So there might be some things you could cut. There might be some things like water or bottled water you're not losing anything. In fact, you get something better for yourself and less wasteful. So that's one approach. Another way is to find a way to earn more. And I'll show you in the book, we'll go through a section where I give you 5 little mini chapters. How do you save more? And I show you all kinds of examples so you have this money. I show you how you can earn more so you can speed up the process. And you say, but Tony, I can't earn more. I'm a school teacher. Well, I have the same mentality. My mom, when I was growing up, she wanted me to be a truck driver. She used to watch those Truckmaster truck driving schools, and they talked about you can make $24,000 a year if you become a truck driver. And my mom said, you've got to do this. You'll be on the open road. You'll have the sense of freedom. Your father's locked down. My father worked as a parking attendant underground in a Century City garage in LA for 30-something years of his life, my natural father. And she said, you'll make twice as much as your father and you'll have more freedom. But I looked around and I thought to myself, I think truck driving is a beautiful thing, but I had a mission of things I wanted to do. And I also thought, I don't think I could ever drive that truck far enough or long enough to be able to have freedom for my family for the future, because I didn't understand compounding. I could show a truck driver today how to do it, but I didn't know how. But I did learn something really important along the way. I was 17 years old, and I went to meet this man. Didn't go meet him. I went to attend a seminar by a man named Jim Rohn, who later became one of my first mentors. And Jim was a personal development speaker, and he would get up and talk for 3 hours, which I thought was a long time. If you've been to one of my seminars, you know that's not a long time. And he would share these tools and philosophies of how to improve your life and a few strategies. And I was very touched by him. And the very first night I met him, he said some things I never forgot. He said, you know what? Everybody wants life to change, but for your life to change, you have to change. For things to get better for you, you've got to get better. And he said, instead of complaining about how you don't have the money and how things aren't fair or going on a strike, he said, rarely will that get you. Strikes will get you pennies of improvement. He said the most powerful thing you can do in the marketplace is to understand how the marketplace works. And here's how it works. If you can find a way to do more for others, if you can find a way to add more value and become more valuable, you will become worth more. But you got to be worth more. You've got to be able to say, how can I do more for this business I work on? How can I help them save the money? How can I bring skill sets to make them more profitable? You've got to think about that, because we're all paid in accordance to what our worth is in the marketplace. Not our spiritual worth, not our emotional worth, not what our worth is as a soul, but our economic worth. See, in the world we live in today, there are people that make $7 an hour, and there are people that make $3.5 billion a year. I'm not saying one is better or worse, but I'm saying one has a lot more choices. Now, why? Because if you go to work at McDonald's and you're working fast food, you're going to make about $7.75 an hour currently. I just looked it up. Crazy. It depends on where you live in the country, but $7.75. Now, at $7.75, you don't have enough to really support your family in any way. You're going to have enormous stress. And we could say, well, we should make that number larger. But in reality, the reason you make $7.75 if you work at McDonald's is because almost anyone can be trained to do that job, especially the way it's automated today, in about an hour, maybe 2. But if you're going to earn more, you've got to be able to give more, do more, create more. And I don't mean just work harder. You got to do something that adds more value. David Tepper made the most money of anyone last year in personal income. He made $3.5 billion with a B. And that's because he's a hedge fund guy. And we live in a world where the majority of people are putting their money in a bank where they're getting virtually no money, or maybe 25, a quarter of 1%, maybe 1%. And this man got the people invested with him a 40% return. Now, when you get 40%, that changes your life. Some people, if you're getting 1/4%, if you're getting 1%, it's going to take you a couple decades to double your money. At 40%, you're going to double your money in very short order, less than 2.5 years. So it's an interesting process to see what that value is. And he said, Tony, what you must do is find a way to do more for others than anybody else has done. He said, if you can find a way to help millions of people, then obviously you can be a millionaire if you want to be that. He said, but it's got to be something they want, something they value, something they think is incredible. Now, why do I tell you that? Because the first time I started talking about compounding and saying one way to do it is start to earn more and put more aside. If you think you don't have enough now, I had this school teacher come to me and she said, but I can't. I'm this fixed income, and there's no way for me to get a raise. And I said, you know what? One of the great injustices of our current society is that the most important jobs, like, for example, a teacher, where we're entrusting the future to someone to help us with our kids create their own future, create their skill sets, their abilities, they're horribly paid in this country. But you can complain about the system, or you can take control of what's within your own control, and you can find a way to add more value. She goes, how am I going to do that? I said, I know a school teacher, I described him in the book, who makes $4 million a year. How? He decided, I love working with 30 kids, but if I only work with 30 kids, I'm going to make $60,000 a year. But if I can find a way to work with hundreds of thousands of kids, I could earn hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of dollars. And all he did was he became incredible as a teacher. He's a Korean man, and he just kept better and better. He's always finding a better way to teach, always finding a more enjoyable way to teach, always finding a way to help people remember and learn quicker. He was just a learning machine, and that added value. Every other teacher taught the same stuff. He brought students unique things, and they wanted it. So he created a website where he could mentor them, and we automated the mentoring. He now makes $4 million a year. So I'm just saying this to you not to say you have to make $4 million a year, but my bet is with some creativity, you could come up with something that could bring you an extra $300 a month. And $300 a month, invested over time, could easily bring you $1 million just based on the math and types of returns I described to you earlier. Not a bad thing. If you found a way to do something bigger, all the more power to you. I got a chance, I was on the Today Show one day, and they called me up and they said, we got Warren Buffett, and we want to have you on, and we're going to have the woman who is the youngest female billionaire in the world. And she has this company called Spanx. And I said, what is Spanx? And if you're a woman watching, I'm sure you're smiling, laughing. He doesn't know what Spanx is. Most men don't know what Spanx are, but I guess it's kind of an undergarment that women use to help them effectively shape their body under a dress. This woman, she had no idea how to become a billionaire. It wasn't even her goal to be a billionaire. She just wanted to solve a problem that a lot of women have. And she was on her way to a party, and she cut some pantyhose up and created this little device, and then she thought it was a great idea, and everybody said it was stupid. And she tried and tried and tried and heard no, 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 and she just wouldn't give up. And then finally she got someone to make some, and then she sold some, and then she eventually got on Oprah. And now Spanx is a multi-billion-dollar business, and she's the youngest female billionaire in history. So I want you to know there's a range from school teachers to this one was working at Disneyland. There are people that might want to make $100, $500, $1,000 more a month. And if you find creative ways to earn more by giving more, by creating more, the answers are there. I just want to get you going. I've got a whole chapter on this, but what I don't want to leave this section with you doing is thinking, I can't do this. And I'll just give you one last one. Another way you get the money to grow your financial future is keep more of the money you have. So I've got a whole chapter here in the book on really, it's the secrets of the ultra wealthy that you can use too. And you'll find it in section 5 of the book. And in fact, it's chapter 5.5 if you want to look it up when you go there. And what it is if you're trying to get financially free, you have to remember what is the most expensive cost that you have in your life. I mean, what is the deepest thing you're going to spend money on in your life? And for the vast majority of humans in this country at least, and North America and most Western nations, it's taxes. And so taxes, you got to understand, in this country, the IRS, their job is really simple. They're not mean people. I mean, they're mean people in every industry, so I'm sure there's some. They're like Switzerland. Their job is to get as much money as they can from as many people as they can every year. And your job, according to the Supreme Court, is to use all of your ethical capacity, everything that's ethical, everything that's legal, to pay the least that you can, and you have that right. That's not being not democratic. Now, I paid plenty of taxes, tens of millions of dollars in taxes, and I'm really grateful that I have the ability to do that at this stage of my life. But I also have learned from all the best investors that I've worked with, I'm talking the best on earth, they all know that tax efficiency is one of the ways to speed up how to get from where you are to where you want to be. Because if you can keep more of what you have and compound it, you're going to do even better. And there's a tool that ultra wealthy people know and use. It's IRS sanctioned. The IRS supports it. And very wealthy people and very wealthy organizations use it. And it allows you to grow your investments literally in an environment where it can be not just tax deferred, but tax free. What that means is if you tell me you have $500,000 built up over the years in your 401k, I might say to you, if you're in the 50% tax bracket, no, you have $250,000. You might say, Tony, no, that's not true. I've got $500,000. I said, yeah, but half that's the government's money if you make 50%, if you have 50% tax. But what if that $500,000 could be put in an environment where when you made $500,000, it was all yours? That would get you your goals twice as fast, wouldn't it? Or if you're at a 30% tax rate, 30% faster. It might save you a decade. So be sure to check that part of the book out. All I want to get you to know is the game is you got to tap the power. Step number one. Step number one of being repetitive, but I want you to get it. We want to make that decision right now. Step number one is make the most important financial decision of your life. Decide right now, what percentage are you going to keep for your family forever? What percentage of your money are you going to set aside, automate, and make sure you put in a freedom fund that you're going to start to invest and build into something that will eventually provide that income for you where you never have to work again as long as you live. You only work because you want to, not because you have to. Sound exciting? Well, as simplistic as it is, I'm sure part of your brain's going, well, okay, I'll do that, but where am I going to invest? Where am I going to put this money? That's coming next. But first, you got to make the first step. So let me turn this video off. Either pick up the book, read the details, or call Fidelity or Schwab, or go online and find a way you're going to just automate deducting. What's the number? Don't change it. If you already got a number, increase it. Is it 10? Is it 12? Is it 14? Is it 15? Is it 20? Is it at least 7 or 8? And then what are you going to do to grow it through time? All right? Hope I got your attention. The power of compounding will give you real wealth, not just going for a big hit. And hey, by the way, if you get a big hit and you're smart, you'll throw a bunch of it into your freedom fund. You'll just get there faster. Thanks for watching. Look for my next video in a couple of days. Live strong and live with passion.